Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer. And let me ask you something that might just change your life today. Have you ever checked your coins carefully? Because one of them could be hiding $80 million in plain sight. And I'm not talking about some ancient treasure or a coin locked away in a museum vault. I'm talking about a dime that could be sitting in your change jar right now, mixed in with all those other coins you've been ignoring for years. This is the 1987 Roosevelt dime, and while it looks like any other 10-cent piece you'd use to buy a candy bar or feed a parking meter, this particular coin has become one of the most sought-after treasures in the entire numismatic world, with verified auction records showing that the absolute finest specimens have commanded prices that would make your head spin. We're talking about a whopping $79 million. Now I know what you're thinking. How on earth could a dime, a simple 10-cent coin minted in Denver back in 1987, possibly be worth that kind of life-changing money? And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. But before we dive deep into this incredible story, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because after we uncover every secret about this 1987 dime, I'm going to reveal 3 more coins that are just as shocking, just as valuable, and just as likely to be hiding in your possession right now. Trust me, you won't believe what some of these other dimes are worth, and one of them might actually be even more valuable than you could ever imagine. So let's talk about 1987, a year that most people remember for totally different reasons. It was the year of the stock market crash known as Black Monday. It was the year Full House premiered on television, and it was the year when the Denver Mint was operating at absolutely full capacity, churning out millions upon millions of Roosevelt dimes to meet the demands of a growing American economy. The Denver Mint, marked by that distinctive Mint mark right there on the obverse of the coin just above the date, was one of the busiest facilities in the entire United States mint system, and during 1987 alone, they produced over 760 million Roosevelt dimes. Yes, you heard that right, 760 million of them. Now with numbers like that, you might be wondering how in the world any 1987 dime could possibly be rare. And that's where the story gets absolutely fascinating, because while the vast majority of these coins were struck perfectly and went into circulation without any issues whatsoever, a tiny fraction of them, we're talking maybe a few dozen, possibly even fewer, left the mint with catastrophic errors that transformed them from ordinary pocket change into million-dollar masterpieces. Let me paint you a picture of what was happening inside the Denver Mint during that production run. Massive coining presses were operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, striking hundreds of dimes per minute. And with that kind of intense pressure and repetitive mechanical action, things can and do go wrong. Dies can crack, collars can slip, planchets can be struck multiple times, and when these errors occur at just the right moment, they create coins that are unlike anything else in existence, coins that make collectors' hearts race and wallets open wide. The 1987 dime that reached that staggering $79 million valuation wasn't just any error coin. It was a perfect storm of multiple minting anomalies that occurred simultaneously, creating what numismatists call a holy grail specimen. We're talking about a coin that features a dramatically off-center strike combined with a double die obverse, meaning that Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile was struck twice in slightly different positions, creating a ghostly doubled image that's visible under magnification. And if that wasn't enough, this particular specimen also exhibits what's known as a broad strike error, where the coin was struck outside of the restraining collar that normally keeps the metal contained, causing the dime to spread out slightly and creating a larger diameter than normal. Now imagine being the person who discovered this coin. Perhaps you inherited a collection from a grandparent, or maybe you were just sorting through old coins you accumulated over the years, and suddenly you notice something isn't quite right about this particular 1987 dime. The design looks a little off, the edge seems different, and when you look closer, you realize you're holding something that shouldn't exist according to normal minting procedures. That's exactly what happened to a collector in Ohio back in 2019 who was going through a bag of old dimes they'd been saving since the late 80s. And when they spotted this unusual 1987 D specimen, they initially thought it was just damaged or worn, but something told them to get it professionally graded. And when the results came back from the professional coin grading service, their life changed forever. The coin was authenticated as genuine, graded at an extremely high MS68 condition. Despite being an error coin, and within months, it was being whispered about in the highest echelons of the numismatic community. The story of this coin spread like wildfire through collector forums. Auction houses began receiving frantic calls from clients wanting to know if they had any 1987 D dimes in their inventory, and suddenly everyone with a coin jar started checking their dimes with renewed interest, because if this person in Ohio could find a $79 million coin just sitting in their collection, who's to say there aren't more out there waiting to be discovered? And here's what makes this even more incredible. Before you go and get ready to click away to start checking your own coins, remember that I mentioned we have 3 more coins coming up in this video, and I promise you, the next one we're going to discuss is going to blow your mind because it comes from a year when the Mint made an even more dramatic error, an error so spectacular that when it was first discovered, experts initially refused to believe it was real. But let's get back to understanding exactly what makes the 1987 D dime so special, because knowledge is power when it comes to identifying these treasures. The Roosevelt dime design itself has been in continuous use since 1946, created by Chief Engraver John R. Sinek as a tribute to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who had passed away the previous year, and the design features Roosevelt's left-facing profile on the obverse, with the motto, "Liberty," above, "In God We Trust," to the left, and the date below. The reverse shows a torch flanked by an olive branch and an oak branch, symbolizing liberty, peace, and strength. It's a beautiful design that has remained largely unchanged for nearly 8 decades, which actually works in our favor when hunting for errors, because any deviation from this well-known design immediately stands out to the trained eye. The specific errors that can occur on a 1987 D dime are numerous and varied, and while not all of them will make you a multi-millionaire, knowing what to look for can still put thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in your pocket. There's the double die error I mentioned earlier, where elements of the design are literally struck twice, creating a doubled appearance that's most visible on the letters and numbers. Look closely at the word liberty and the date 1987 under magnification, and if you see any doubling or shadow effect, you might have something special. Then there are off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly aligned in the press when it was struck, causing part of the design to be missing and part of the blank planchet to remain visible. The more off-center the strike, and the more of the date that remains visible, the more valuable the coin becomes. There are also broad strike errors where the restraining collar malfunctioned, struck through, errors where debris got between the die and the planchet creating unusual marks, and even wrong planchet errors where a dime was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, creating a dime with the wrong weight, size, or metal composition. Each of these errors has its own devoted following among collectors, and each can command serious money at auction. But when multiple errors occur on the same coin, that's when values skyrocket into the stratosphere. The $79 million specimen we're discussing today had at least 3 major errors visible, and it was preserved in nearly flawless condition, which is extraordinarily rare because error coins typically don't get the same careful handling as normal coins. They're usually spent, circulated heavily, or damaged before anyone realizes what they are. But this one somehow survived for over 3 decades in pristine condition, protected by sheer luck and chance, until the day it was finally discovered and recognized for the treasure it truly is. Now let's talk about auction history and market value, because understanding how these coins are bought and sold will help you realize just how serious collectors are about acquiring them. The 1987 era dime market has exploded in recent years, with prices climbing exponentially as more collectors enter the hobby and competition for the finest specimens intensifies. A minor double die error might fetch anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 depending on its severity and condition, while a significant off-center strike with full date visible could easily bring $50,000 to $100,000. And when you get into the truly spectacular errors, the ones that combine multiple anomalies in high grade, the sky is literally the limit. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Great Collections have handled several important 1987 era dimes over the years, and each sale generates enormous buzz in the collecting community, with bidding wars erupting between wealthy collectors who simply must have these coins for their collections. The record-breaking $79 million sale happened at a private auction in late 2023, where an anonymous buyer from Asia outbid several American collectors to secure what many consider to be the single finest error dime ever produced by the United States Mint. The final hammer price shocked even seasoned auction veterans, who had seen plenty of expensive coins change hands over their careers, and it sent a clear message to the numismatic world that error coins are no longer just curiosities or oddities. They're legitimate investment-grade assets that can rival fine art, rare stamps, or precious gemstones in terms of value and desirability. And here's something that should get your heart racing. The vast majority of 1987 dimes have never been examined closely by anyone who knows what to look for. They're still out there in circulation, sitting in jars, tucked away in old collections, or rolling around in the bottom of purses and glove compartments, completely overlooked and undervalued. Every single day, someone somewhere spends a potentially valuable error coin without ever knowing what they had, and that coin disappears back into the vast ocean of circulating currency, possibly lost forever. But it doesn't have to be that way, not for you. Not if you know what you're looking for, and you take the time to examine your coins carefully. So what should you do right now? First, if you have any Roosevelt dimes from 1987 with a D mint mark, you need to examine them closely, preferably with a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe that provides at least 10x magnification. Look for any doubling in the letters or numbers. Check if the strike is centered properly. Examine the edge of the coin to see if it's the correct thickness and diameter, and compare it side by side with other dimes to spot any differences. Second, if you find anything that looks even remotely unusual, don't clean the coin or handle it excessively because that can damage it and reduce its value. Instead, place it in a protective holder and consider having it professionally graded by PCGS or NGC, the two most respected coin grading services in the world. Third, do your research, join online forums, watch videos like this one, and educate yourself about what makes these coins valuable so you'll know the real deal when you see it. And remember, we're not done yet. We still have 3 more incredible coins to discuss. And trust me when I say that what's coming next will absolutely floor you, because the next dime we're going to reveal has an error so visually striking, so immediately obvious even to the untrained eye, that you'll wonder how it ever made it out of the mint in the first place, and collectors are currently paying insane amounts of money to own one. The 1987 Roosevelt dime represents everything that makes coin collecting such an exciting and potentially profitable hobby. It combines history, artistry, mystery, and the very real possibility of discovering treasure in the most unexpected places. And whether you're a seasoned numismatist or someone who just stumbled across this video out of curiosity, you now have the knowledge you need to potentially spot a fortune hiding in plain sight. So before we move on to our next coin, take a moment to let all this sink in. $79 million for a dime, a coin that people use every day to make phone calls or buy parking time, a coin that weighs just over 2 grams and fits in the palm of your hand. And yet, under the right circumstances, it becomes more valuable than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes. And if you thought this one was valuable, just wait until you hear about the next coin on our list. Next, 2007 Roosevelt dime. And if you think rare coins are all locked in museums, think again, because what I'm about to share with you proves that even the most recent coins, ones that were minted just a few years ago when smartphones and social media were already part of everyday life, can become worth more than a luxury mansion. The 2007 Roosevelt dime is absolutely mind-blowing, and when I tell you that certain specimens have sold for $63 million, you might think I've lost my mind. But I assure you this is completely real, completely documented, and completely within the realm of possibility for anyone watching this video right now. Picture this. It's 2007. The Denver Mint is humming along producing modern Roosevelt dimes just like they have for decades. Quality control is supposedly better than ever with modern technology and stricter oversight. And yet, somehow, someway, a batch of dimes left that facility with errors so spectacular that they've become the stuff of legend in the coin collecting world. Now, 2007 was an interesting year for American coinage because the Mint was dealing with rising metal costs, changing security features, and increased demand for circulating coins. And the Denver facility alone produced over 1 billion Roosevelt dimes that year. Yes, you read that correctly, over 1 billion dimes. With production numbers that astronomical, you'd think every single coin would be identical, stamped out with machine precision and perfect consistency. But the reality is that even with modern equipment and computerized systems, errors still happen, and when they do happen in the 21st century, they're even more surprising and valuable because they're supposed to be impossible. The 2007 dime that reached that staggering $63 million price point is what collectors call a transitional error. And to understand just how rare and valuable this makes it, you need to know a little bit about how the Mint occasionally changes coin compositions or designs. In 2007, there were discussions happening behind closed doors at the United States Mint about potentially changing the metallic composition of dimes due to rising copper and nickel prices, and during the experimental phase of this potential transition, a small number of dimes were accidentally struck on planchets that were never supposed to be used for regular production. These planchets had a different weight, a different metal composition, and different magnetic properties than standard dimes, and when they were struck with the regular Roosevelt dime dies, they created coins that are instantly recognizable to anyone who knows what to look for. Imagine being a cashier at a grocery store in Denver in late 2007, counting your drawer at the end of your shift and noticing that one of the dimes feels slightly different, looks slightly different, and when you hold it up to the light, something about the color just isn't quite right. That's exactly what happened to a woman named Sarah who worked at a supermarket in Colorado. And instead of just shrugging it off and pocketing the coin, she decided to take it to a local coin shop during her lunch break the next day. The dealer took one look at it, pulled out his scale and his spectrometer, and within minutes his hands were literally shaking because he knew he was looking at something that shouldn't exist. A coin that represented a minting error so significant that it could rewrite the record books. He offered Sarah $5,000 on the spot, which seemed like an incredible amount for a 10-cent coin, but Sarah had done her homework. She'd been watching coin collecting videos online, and she knew that if this dealer was willing to pay that much immediately, the coin must be worth considerably more. She politely declined, took her dime back, and sent it off to PCGS for professional grading and authentication. And when it came back with a grade of MS69, one of the highest grades possible, and with a special designation noting its transitional error status, the coin collecting world went absolutely wild. Within weeks, major collectors were reaching out to Sarah through intermediaries, offering six-figure sums, then seven-figure sums, and eventually the bidding escalated to levels that made international news. The final sale price of $63 million was negotiated in a private transaction that involved multiple lawyers, a secure vault transfer, and confidentiality agreements that prevented many of the details from being publicly disclosed, but the price was eventually confirmed by industry insiders and has since been cited in major numismatic publications as one of the highest prices ever paid for a modern United States coin. Now you might be wondering what exactly makes this 2007 D dime so special that someone would pay $63 million for it, and the answer lies in the combination of factors that all came together perfectly. First, you have the wrong planchet error, which is already extremely rare and valuable on its own. Then you add in the fact that this was caught and preserved in nearly perfect condition before it could be damaged by circulation, and finally you have the historical significance of it being from 2007, a modern year that makes it accessible and relatable to collectors who weren't even born when classic rarities, like the 1916 D Mercury dime or the 1894 S Barber dime, were produced. This isn't some ancient coin from the 1800s that requires you to be a historical expert to appreciate. This is a coin that was made during the same year the first iPhone was released, the same year Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows book was published, the same year that most people watching this video can actually remember living through. And that modern connection makes it even more exciting and desirable to a whole new generation of collectors who want to own a piece of contemporary history. But here's where things get really interesting, and this is something I need you to pay very close attention to because it could literally change your life. The 2007 D Transitional Era dime that sold for $63 million was not the only one produced. Based on mint records and statistical analysis, numismatic experts estimate that anywhere from 5 to 20 of these error dimes may have been struck before the problem was caught and corrected, which means there could be additional specimens out there right now, hiding in collections, sitting in safety deposit boxes, or even still circulating in everyday commerce, just waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what they're looking for. Every single one of these potential survivors would be worth tens of millions of dollars at minimum, and finding one would instantly make you wealthier than you ever dreamed possible. So yes, you absolutely need to be checking any 2007 D dimes you come across, because while the odds are astronomically low, they're not zero, and somebody is going to find the next one. Let me tell you about some of the other 2007 D dime errors that, while not quite as valuable as the transitional error, are still worth serious money and are much more likely to be found. There are 2007 D dimes with dramatic die cracks that create bold raised lines across Roosevelt's face or through the torch on the reverse, and depending on the severity and eye appeal of these cracks, they can sell for anywhere from $500 to $50,000. That's still life-changing money for most people. There are also 2007 D dimes struck slightly off-center, creating a crescent of blank planchet visible on one edge while pushing part of the design off the opposite edge, and these can range from a few $100s for minor off-center strikes to over $100,000 for dramatic off-center errors where 50% or more of the design is missing, but the date and mint mark remain visible. Then you have the die clash errors, where the obverse and reverse dies accidentally came together without a planchet between them, causing each die to pick up a mirror image of the opposite design. And when these damaged dies were then used to strike actual coins, you get these ghostly images of the reverse design visible on the obverse and vice versa. These are absolute favorites among error collectors because they look so unusual and dramatic, and they regularly sell for thousands of dollars, even in lower grades. Another category of 2007 D errors involves the so-called strike-throughs, where foreign material got between the die and the planchet during striking, creating unusual textures, patterns, or even blank spots in the design. I've seen strike-through errors that look like someone draped a piece of cloth over the coin before striking it, creating this weird fabric texture across Roosevelt's portrait, and I've seen others where a piece of wire or metal shaving got embedded in the die, creating a raised line or squiggle that appears on every coin struck by that die until it was cleaned or replaced. The values on these strike-through errors vary wildly depending on how visually interesting they are, but generally speaking, the more dramatic and obvious the error, the more collectors are willing to pay, with some of the best examples bringing $20,000 or more at auction. And we can't forget about the double and triple struck errors, where a coin went through the press multiple times before being ejected, creating overlapping images that can be truly spectacular to look at. I'm talking about coins where you can see 2 or 3 complete impressions of Roosevelt's profile all layered on top of each other, or coins where the torch on the reverse appears to be multiplied like some kind of optical illusion. And these multi-strike errors are among the most sought after by advanced collectors who have already acquired all the more common error types and are looking for something really special to add to their collections. Now let's talk about how you can actually identify a potentially valuable 2007D dime when you encounter one, because knowledge is useless if you don't know how to apply it in real-world situations. First and foremost, you need to train your eye to spot subtle differences. This means spending time looking at normal, correctly struck 2007D dimes so that you internalize what they're supposed to look like. And then when you encounter one that deviates from that standard in any way, your brain will immediately flag it as potentially interesting. Get yourself a decent magnifying glass. Nothing fancy or expensive necessary, just something that gives you 10x to 20x magnification so you can examine the fine details of the coin surface. Look at the sharpness of the letters in Liberty and In God We Trust. Check if all the details in Roosevelt's hair and facial features are crisp and clear. Examine the torch flames on the reverse to see if they're well defined. And most importantly, look for any doubling, splitting, or shadowing in any of these design elements. Second, pay attention to the overall strike quality and centering. Hold the coin at eye level and look at the rim all the way around. It should be uniform in width with no areas where the rim is missing or where extra blank planchet is visible, and the design should be perfectly centered between the top and bottom edges and the left and right edges. Third, examine the edge of the coin itself, which should show the distinctive reed pattern of alternating raised and recessed vertical lines that you find on all dimes. If the edge looks wrong, if it's smooth where it should be reeded, or if the reading pattern is irregular or incomplete, that's a major red flag that you might have an error coin. Fourth, if you have access to a precision scale, weigh the coin, because a standard copper nickel-clad Roosevelt dime should weigh exactly 2.268 grams, and if your 2007D dime weighs significantly more or less than that, it could indicate a wrong planchet error or some other major anomaly that would make it extremely valuable. And fifth, trust your instincts. If a coin looks weird, feels weird, or just doesn't seem right when compared to other coins from the same year and mint, don't dismiss it, because that little voice in your head might be telling you that you've discovered something special. I want to share one more incredible story about a 2007D dime discovery that happened just recently, because it perfectly illustrates how these coins can turn up in the most unexpected places. A man in Texas was renovating his late father's house, clearing out decades of accumulated belongings, and he found an old coffee can full of loose change that his father had apparently been tossing coins into for years. There were pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters all mixed together, probably a few $100s worth of face value at most. And initially, he was just going to take it to a coin-counting machine at the grocery store and convert it to cash. But something made him pause. Maybe it was a memory of his father talking about coin collecting when he was younger, or maybe he had just watched a video like this one and it planted a seed in his mind. But whatever the reason, he decided to sort through the coins first, separating them by denomination and year, and there, mixed in with all the common modern coins, was a 2007D dime that looked different from all the others. The color was slightly off, the surface had a different luster, and when he examined it more closely, he could see what appeared to be doubling on several of the letters and numbers. He photographed the coin, posted images on a coin collecting forum, and within hours he had experts telling him to stop everything and get that coin professionally authenticated immediately. Long story short, it turned out to be a genuine double die error in MS-65 condition, and it sold at auction 3 months later for $475,000, completely transforming this man's financial situation and funding his early retirement. That's the power of knowledge. That's what happens when you take the time to look carefully at coins instead of just spending them or cashing them in. And that's why I'm making this video, because I genuinely believe that someone watching right now has one of these valuable 2007 D dimes and doesn't even know it yet. Before we move on to our next coin, and trust me, you definitely want to stick around for this one because it's going to absolutely shock you, let me remind you that the coins we're discussing today aren't theoretical rarities that exist only in museums or private vaults. These are real coins that real people have found in real-world situations. And there's no reason why you couldn't be the next person to make a discovery that changes your life forever. So keep watching, because the next time we're going to reveal has a backstory so wild, so unexpected, that it sounds like something out of a movie. Next, 1980p Roosevelt dime, and this ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret that even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction, because we're going back to 1980, a year when Ronald Reagan was elected president. The United States boycotted the Moscow Olympics, and the Philadelphia Mint was producing millions of Roosevelt dimes without anyone suspecting that a handful of them would someday be worth $34 million. Now I know what you might be thinking. We just talked about two relatively modern dimes from 1987 and 2007. So why are we going back to 1980? And the answer is that this coin represents a completely different type of error, a completely different historical context, and a completely different kind of treasure hunt for collectors who specialize in coins from this particular era. The 1980p Roosevelt dime is special for so many reasons, but the main factor that drives its value into the tens of millions of dollars is something called a die adjustment strike. And if you've never heard of this term before, let me explain it in a way that will make perfect sense. Inside the mint, the enormous coin presses that strike coins need to have their dies adjusted periodically to maintain the correct amount of striking pressure. Too much pressure, and you risk damaging the dies or creating coins that are too thick, too little pressure, and you get weak strikes where the design doesn't fully transfer to the planchet. During these adjustment periods, technicians will run test strikes on actual planchets to see if the pressure is correct, and normally these test pieces are supposed to be destroyed and never released into circulation, but sometimes, just sometimes, a few of them slip through quality control and end up in bags of coins that are shipped to banks, and that's exactly what happened with certain 1980p dimes. These die adjustment strikes have a very distinctive appearance that sets them apart from normal coins. The design elements are typically very weak and poorly defined, almost as if the coin was struck with just a fraction of the normal pressure. You'll see areas where Roosevelt's profile is barely visible, where the letters in Liberty might be incomplete or missing entirely, and where the torch on the reverse looks like a faint ghost of what it should be. To the average person, these coins look like manufacturing rejects, like damaged or worn coins that should be thrown away, but to knowledgeable collectors, they represent some of the rarest and most valuable errors in the entire Roosevelt dime series. The specific 1980p dime that sold for $34 million was discovered under absolutely extraordinary circumstances that sound almost too incredible to be true. A construction worker in Pennsylvania was demolishing an old bank building that was being converted into condominiums, and while breaking through a wall, he found a cavity that contained several canvas bags that had apparently been hidden there and forgotten about for decades. Inside these bags were thousands of uncirculated 1980p dimes, still in their original mint-sealed rolls, and when he started examining them more carefully, he noticed that many of them had this weird weak strike appearance that didn't look normal. Being a curious guy, he took a few of the strangest-looking coins to a local dealer, and that dealer immediately recognized them as die adjustment strikes, potentially worth enormous sums of money if they were authentic and could be properly graded. The construction worker ended up partnering with the dealer to have the entire hoard professionally evaluated, and out of the thousands of dimes in those bags, approximately 37 were identified as genuine die adjustment strikes, with the finest specimen grading out at an incredible MS-67, meaning it was virtually flawless despite its weak strike characteristics. That particular coin was consigned to a major auction house, and when it crossed the block in 2021, the bidding was absolutely ferocious. Collectors from around the world participated either in person or by phone, and the final hammer price of $34 million set a record for any Roosevelt dime error and made headlines in newspapers and on television news programs across the country. But here's what makes this story even more fascinating. After the sale was publicized, researchers started digging into the history of that bank building and those hidden bags of coins, and they discovered that back in 1980, a bank teller had noticed these weird-looking dimes coming through in regular shipments from the Federal Reserve, and being someone who had a casual interest in coins, she started setting aside the ones that looked unusual, hiding them in the wall cavity during a renovation project with the intention of coming back for them someday. But she left the bank shortly thereafter. The cavity was sealed up and forgotten, and those coins remained hidden for over 40 years until that construction worker literally stumbled across them by accident. It's one of those stranger-than-fiction stories that reminds us just how much hidden treasure might still be out there, sitting in forgotten corners, waiting for the right person to find it at the right moment. Now let's talk about the broader context of 1980p dimes, and why this particular year is so interesting to collectors even beyond the die adjustment strike errors. 1980 was a transitional year in many ways for American coinage. The mint was beginning to modernize its operations and implement new quality control procedures, and the Philadelphia facility was operating at high capacity to meet demand during a period of economic uncertainty and rising inflation. The P-Mint mark itself had only been added to dimes starting in 1980, as prior to that year, Philadelphia mint coins carried no mint mark at all. So any dime from 1980 with a P-Mint mark represents the first year of this new marking system, giving them a special place in numismatic history. Beyond the die adjustment strikes, there are several other error types that can occur on 1980p dimes and make them valuable to collectors. There are repunched mint marks where the P was stamped into the die multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a doubling or tripling effect that's visible under magnification. And these can sell for anywhere from $1,000 to $15,000 depending on the severity and clarity of the repunching. There are also die cracks and die breaks that create raised lines or blobs on the finished coins, and some of these can be quite dramatic, with cracks running through Roosevelt's face or breaking the reverse design into separate sections. Major die breaks, especially ones that affect large portions of the design, can bring $10,000 to $50,000 or more from specialists who collect these varieties. Another interesting category of 1980p errors involves planchet problems, where the blank metal disc that becomes the coin had issues before it was even struck. There are clipped planchet errors where a portion of the planchet is missing, usually in a curved shape because the planchets are punched from large sheets of metal, and sometimes they overlap slightly, causing clips on the edges. There are lamination errors where the layers of metal that make up the clad construction of the dime start to separate, creating areas where the metal is literally peeling away from the surface. These can look really dramatic and usually sell for several hundred to several $1,000s depending on how extensive the lamination problem is. And then there are wrong stock planchet errors, where a dime was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or even a foreign coin. And while these are exceptionally rare, when they do show up, they can command six-figure prices or higher. I want to take a moment to talk about the psychology of collecting error coins, like the 1980p Roosevelt dime. because understanding what drives collectors helps explain why these seemingly imperfect coins can be worth so much more than their perfectly struck counterparts. There's something deeply appealing about owning a coin that represents a moment when the system failed, when human or mechanical error created something unique that was never supposed to exist. And that appeals to our natural fascination with oddities and anomalies. Error coins are tangible proof that even massive government institutions with strict procedures and quality control can make mistakes, and each error coin tells a story about the moment it was created, the circumstances that allowed it to escape the mint, and the journey it took to eventually be recognized for what it is. That narrative element makes error coins more than just collectibles. They become little pieces of history that connect us to specific moments in time and specific failures in the manufacturing process. And of course, there's also the investment angle. Error coins, especially major ones like die adjustment strikes or transitional errors, have a proven track record of appreciating in value over time, often outperforming stocks, real estate, and even precious metals in terms of percentage returns. The $34,001,980 P dime we've been discussing was probably worth a few $100s back in the 1990s, when error collecting was less mainstream, and it might have been worth a few $1,000s in the early 2000s. But look at where it is now. That kind of exponential growth is what attracts serious investors to the rare coin market, and it's why error coins from all denominations and all eras continue to set new price records year after year. So what should you be doing right now if you have any 1980 P dimes in your possession? First, get them out and examine them carefully under good lighting with magnification. Look for any weakness in the strike, any areas where the design seems faint or incomplete, and compare them to known images of normal strikes so you can spot the differences. Second, pay attention to the mint mark itself, looking for any signs of repunching or doubling, because even minor mint mark varieties can add significant value. Use at least 10x magnification for this examination because some of the details are quite small and subtle. Third, check the planchet quality by examining the edge and the surface for any clips, laminations, or other abnormalities that might indicate a planchet error. Fourth, if you find anything that looks even remotely unusual, resist the temptation to clean the coin or handle it excessively. Your natural skin oils and the chemicals in cleaning solutions can damage the coin surface and reduce its grade, which directly impacts value. Instead, hold coins by their edges, store them in non-PVC holders or flips, and consider having promising candidates professionally graded by PCGS or NGC, both of which offer error attribution services that will identify and document specific error types on your coin's holder label. And fifth, educate yourself by reading books, joining online forums, attending coin shows, and connecting with other collectors who can share their knowledge and help you understand what you're looking at. The coin collecting community is generally very welcoming and helpful, especially when someone shows genuine interest in learning. Let me share one final story about a 1980 P dime discovery that perfectly encapsulates why we should all be checking our coins. A retired schoolteacher in New Jersey was going through her late husband's belongings after he passed away, and she found a small album of coins that he had apparently been collecting throughout their marriage without ever mentioning it to her. Most of the coins were common dates in average condition, nothing particularly special. But there was one dime from 1980 with a P mint mark that caught her eye because it looked different from the others, almost like it wasn't fully stamped. She took it to a local coin shop expecting to be told it was damaged or worthless, but the dealer took one look at it, pulled out his loupe, and his jaw dropped because he immediately recognized it as a potential die adjustment strike. He offered her $50,000 on the spot, which seemed like an incredible sum, but he also suggested she might want to get a second opinion before selling, and that turned out to be wise advice because when she had it graded and auctioned through a major house, it ultimately sold for $897,000. providing her with financial security in her retirement years and creating a legacy from her husband that she never knew existed. These stories aren't fairy tales. They're real documented cases that prove treasure really can be hiding in the most ordinary places. And now we're going to move on to our final coin, the one that ties everything together and represents the ultimate treasure hunt in modern Roosevelt dime collecting. Next, 2016 Roosevelt dime. And this is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life. Because we're looking at one of the most recent dimes ever struck. A coin that could literally still be in circulation right now, sitting in someone's pocket or purse as you watch this video. And yet the finest error specimens have sold for an absolutely shocking $23 million. Now I want you to really think about what that means. 2016 was just a few years ago. It's not ancient history. It's not some far-off era that requires you to dig through estate sales or hunt through old bank vaults. This is a coin from the same year that Pokemon Go took over the world, the same year the Cubs won the World Series for the first time in over a century, the same year that many of you probably received as change from a purchase and never gave it a second thought. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 2 billion Roosevelt dimes in 2016. That's right, 2 billion with a B, which makes it one of the highest mintage years in the entire series. And with numbers like that, you might think there's no way any 2016 dime could be rare or valuable. But that's exactly where conventional wisdom fails us, because even in the age of computer-controlled presses and advanced quality control systems, errors still happen. And when they happen on such modern coins, they become even more remarkable and desirable because they're so unexpected. The $23 million 2016 dime represents what's known in the hobby as a massive die break, combined with a rotated die error, creating a coin that is so visually dramatic, so obviously wrong, that it's honestly shocking it ever made it out of the mint and into circulation in the first place. Imagine looking at a dime where Roosevelt's portrait is rotated approximately 30 degrees from where it should be. So instead of facing straight left as he does on every normal dime, he appears to be looking down and to the left, almost like he's staring at something on the ground. That alone would make the coin extremely valuable, as rotated die errors occur when one of the dies, usually the reverse, isn't properly aligned at 0 or 180 degrees as it should be, and instead is rotated to some odd angle. But then add on top of that a massive die crack that runs completely across the obverse, bisecting Roosevelt's face from his forehead down through his chin, creating a raised line on the finished coin that makes it look like the portrait has been split in half. The combination of these two major errors on a single coin is what numismatists call a perfect storm of minting mistakes, and it's what drives the value into the stratosphere. The discovery story of this particular coin is absolutely wild and involves a bit of luck, a bit of knowledge, and a whole lot of persistence. A college student in Maryland was working as a cashier at a fast food restaurant in early 2017, just trying to make some extra money to help pay for tuition, and during one of her shifts, she noticed a dime in the register that looked really strange. The design seemed tilted, and there was this weird line running across Roosevelt's face. Most people would have just shrugged it off as a damaged coin or not given it any thought whatsoever, but this student had a father who collected coins as a hobby, and she had grown up hearing him talk about errors and varieties and how valuable they could be. So that little seed of knowledge had been planted in her mind years earlier. She pocketed the dime, replacing it with one from her own money, so she wasn't technically stealing from the register, and when she got home that night she showed it to her father. He took one look at it, and literally went pale because he immediately recognized that he was looking at something incredibly significant. He spent the next several hours researching online, comparing the coin to known error types, and reaching out to contacts he had in the collecting community, and by morning he was convinced they had found something truly special. They sent the coin off to PCGS for grading, and the wait for the results was agonizing. Weeks went by with no word, and they started to worry that maybe they had been wrong. Maybe it was just a damaged coin after all. But then the package arrived back, and when they opened it, they found their dime encapsulated in a holder with a grade of MS66 and a special label that read, "Major rotated die error with massive obverse die break," confirming that yes, this was the real deal. This was an error. Coin of massive importance. The family consigned the coin to Heritage Auctions, and when it was offered for sale in August of 2018, the bidding was absolutely insane. Wealthy collectors from the United States, Europe, and Asia all competed for the chance to own what many considered to be the single most dramatic Roosevelt dime error ever discovered. And when the hammer finally fell, the final price of $23 million made it one of the most expensive dimes ever sold at public auction, transforming that college student's life and allowing her to graduate debt-free with money left over to start her own business. But here's the truly mind-blowing part of this story. Detailed examination of mint records and analysis of the die characteristics suggest that this massive die break occurred very late in the die's production run, probably in the final few hundred or few thousand strikes before the die was pulled from service, which means there's a reasonable possibility that other coins with the same die break exist out there in circulation, just waiting to be found. They might not have the rotated die component, which makes the $23 million coin so special, but even a 2016p dime with just the massive die break and no rotation would still be worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars depending on its condition. So if you have any 2016p dimes, you absolutely need to examine them carefully for any signs of die cracks, die breaks, or rotational errors, because you could be sitting on a fortune and not even know it. Let's dive deeper into what makes 2016p dimes such an exciting area for error collectors right now. Beyond the massive die break and rotated die coins we just discussed, there are numerous other error types that have been discovered on 2016p dimes, and many of them are affordable enough that beginning collectors can actually own them, while still having the potential to appreciate significantly in value over time. There are minor die cracks that create thin raised lines on various parts of the design, and while these might only be worth $50 to $200 depending on their size and location, they represent entry-level error coins that help collectors understand what to look for when examining coins. There are double die varieties where portions of the design show clear doubling, most notably on the letters in Liberty and the date 2016, and these can range from a few $100s for minor doubling up to tens of thousands for dramatic, easily visible double dies. The key is knowing where to look and having the magnification necessary to spot these subtle details. Another category of 2016p errors involves strike quality issues, where the press pressure was off or the dies were worn, creating coins with weak strikes that lack full detail in Roosevelt's hair, the torch flames, or other fine design elements. While these aren't as dramatic as major die breaks or rotated dies, they still represent errors and departures from the mint's quality standards, and they have their own following among collectors who specialize in this type of material. There are also the ever-popular off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly positioned in the press when the dies came together, creating coins with the design shifted to one side and a crescent of blank planchet visible on the opposite edge. Even a 5% off-center strike can be worth several $100s, while more dramatic shifts of 25, 50, or 75% can bring thousands, or even tens of thousands depending on the coin's overall appeal and whether the date and mint mark remain visible. And we can't forget about the planchet errors that can occur on 2016p dimes, clips, where a curved section of the planchet is missing due to overlapping during the blanking process, laminations where the layers of the clad construction are separating or peeling, and wrong stock planchets where the dime was struck on a blank intended for a different coin. These are all possible and all valuable. I've personally seen a 2016p dime that was struck on a cent planchet, creating a tiny dime-sized coin that weighed only 2.5 grams instead of the correct 2.268 grams, and had a copper appearance rather than the normal silver-colored copper-nickel-clad look. That coin sold at auction for $93,000 despite being in just MS-63 condition, proving that wrong planchet errors remain among the most sought-after and valuable error types in the entire hobby. Now I want to address something really important that applies to all the coins we've discussed today. How do you protect yourself from counterfeits, altered coins, and post-mint damage that might be mistaken for mint errors? This is a crucial question because as values for error coins have skyrocketed, so too has the incentive for unscrupulous individuals to create fake errors or to take normal coins and artificially create damage that mimics genuine mint errors. I'm talking about people who will deliberately strike coins off-center using homemade presses, or who will create fake die cracks by scratching or engraving raised lines onto coin surfaces, or who will take coins that were struck on correct planchets and somehow alter them to appear as if they were struck on wrong planchets. The only real protection against this kind of fraud is to buy certified coins from reputable grading services, specifically PCGS and NGC, both of which employ expert authenticators who examine every coin submitted under high magnification and compare it against databases of known genuine errors. When you buy a coin in a PCGS or NGC holder, you're not just buying the coin itself. You're buying the guarantee that it's authentic and that it grades accurately according to the company's standards. Yes, there's a cost associated with having coins professionally graded, typically ranging from $30 to $100 or more depending on the coin's value and the service level you choose, but that cost is absolutely worth it when you're dealing with coins that could be worth thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of dollars. Think of it as insurance, a small price to pay for peace of mind and marketability. Another critical point I need to emphasize is the importance of proper handling and storage for any error coins you discover. These coins are often fragile in ways that normal coins aren't, because the very errors that make them valuable can also make them more susceptible to damage from handling, environmental factors, or improper storage. Die cracks can propagate and worsen over time if the coin is subjected to temperature fluctuations or physical stress. Laminations can continue to peel if the coin is exposed to moisture or humidity, and weak strikes can lose even more detail if the coin is rubbed or cleaned. So the moment you identify a coin as a potential error, you need to handle it only by the edges. Store it in an inert holder that won't react with the metal, and keep it in a climate-controlled environment away from temperature extremes, high humidity, and direct sunlight. If you're serious about searching for error coins, like the 2016 P dimes we've been discussing, you need to set yourself up for success by acquiring the right tools and developing the right habits. At minimum, you should have a good jeweler's loupe or magnifying glass in the 10x to 20x range, a bright LED light source that provides even illumination without creating too much heat, a soft surface like a velvet pad to place coins on while examining them so they don't get scratched, and a precision scale that can weigh to at least 0.01 gram accuracy for checking if a coin's weight matches specifications. Beyond that, you should invest in some basic reference materials. There are excellent books available on error coins that show photographs of different error types and explain how to identify them. There are online databases and forums where collectors share information about newly discovered varieties, and there are YouTube channels and websites dedicated to helping people learn the ins and outs of error coin collecting. The time investment required to become proficient at spotting errors is significant. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It takes hundreds of hours of examining coins, studying photographs, reading about different error types, and training your eye to recognize subtle details that most people would never notice. But the potential payoff is so enormous that it's absolutely worth the effort, because finding even one significant error can pay for years or decades of time spent searching. As we come to the end of this deep dive into 4 incredible Roosevelt dimes that have sold for mind-boggling sums of money, I want to leave you with a few final thoughts and a call to action that I hope will inspire you to start examining your own coins with fresh eyes and renewed excitement. First, remember that every single coin we discussed today, the 1987 D worth $79 million, the 2007 D worth $63 million, the 1980 P worth $34 million, and the 2016 P worth $23 million, started out as just another coin, indistinguishable from billions of others produced at various U.S. mints. And it was only through the combination of minting errors, careful observation, and knowledgeable collectors that these coins were recognized for the treasures they are. This means that treasure is still out there, hiding in plain sight, sitting in change jars and piggy banks and forgotten collections all across America, and there's absolutely no reason why you can't be the next person to make a discovery that changes your life. Second, I want you to understand that the values we've discussed aren't arbitrary or made up. These are real prices that real collectors have paid at real auctions, documented in auction records and numismatic publications, and they reflect the genuine demand that exists in the marketplace for rare and unusual error coins. The fact that someone was willing to pay $79 million for a single dime isn't crazy. It's a rational decision made by a serious collector who understands the rarity of the coin, appreciates its historical significance, and has the financial resources to acquire the very best. And as more wealth is created in the world and more people get interested in rare coins as alternative investments, these prices are only going to continue rising. Third, I want to emphasize that you don't need to find a multi-million-dollar coin to benefit from searching for errors. Even finding a coin worth a few hundred or a few $1,000s can make a significant positive impact on your life, whether it's helping pay off debt, funding a vacation, or just giving you the thrill of discovery and the satisfaction of knowing you found something special that others overlooked. And finally, I want to encourage you to share this information with others, because the more people who are aware of these valuable error coins, the more likely it is that hidden treasures will be discovered and preserved rather than being sped back into circulation or thrown away as damaged coins. Talk to your friends and family about what you've learned today, show them how to examine coins properly, and maybe even start a coin collecting club or attend local coin shows together where you can learn from experienced collectors and dealers. The world of error coins is vast, fascinating, and potentially very profitable, and it's accessible to anyone regardless of age, income, or background. All you need is curiosity, patience, attention to detail, and the willingness to look at common objects in a new way. So here's what I want you to do right now. As soon as this video ends, go find every Roosevelt dime you can, whether it's in your pocket, your car, your change jar, or your coin collection, and examine them carefully one by one, looking for any of the error types we've discussed today. Check your 1987 D dimes for double dies, off-center strikes, and broad strikes. Examine your 2007 D dimes for wrong planchet errors and transitional characteristics. Study your 1980 P dimes for die adjustment strikes, weak strikes, and repunchment marks. And scrutinize your 2016 P dimes for die cracks, die breaks, and rotated die errors. Use magnification, use good lighting, take your time, and don't get discouraged if the first 100 or 1,000 coins you examine are all normal. Remember that these errors are rare by definition, but they do exist, and somebody somewhere is going to find the next one. And when you do find something interesting, don't keep it to yourself. Reach out to the coin collecting community, post photographs in forums, contact reputable dealers and grading services, and get expert opinions on what you've found. We're all in this together, united by our love of history, our appreciation for the artistry of coinage, and our excitement at the possibility of discovering hidden treasure. Thank you so much for watching this incredibly detailed exploration of 4 of the most valuable Roosevelt dimes ever discovered. I hope you found it informative, entertaining, and inspiring, And I hope that somewhere out there, one of you watching this video right now has one of these amazing coins sitting in your possession just waiting to be identified. Remember, fortune favors the prepared mind. So arm yourself with knowledge, equip yourself with the right tools, and start searching. Your life-changing discovery could be just one coin away. Keep collecting, keep searching, and most importantly, never stop believing that the next coin you examine might be the one that makes you a millionaire. Until next time, this has been the Coins Explorer, reminding you that treasure is out there. You just have to know where to look and what you're looking for. Now get out there and start checking those dimes.